There are 18 lost years in the life of Jesus, and what happened during that time might shock you. There's evidence that Jesus crossed deserts and mountains. But as far as India, according to a controversial theory, Jesus left his homeland to seek spiritual knowledge in the East. The stories of a man called Issa, recorded in Tibet, bear an uncanny resemblance to the life of Jesus. If this theory is correct, it explains why Jesus' teachings share so many similarities with Hindu and Buddhist philosophies. But if Jesus truly went to India, why has the church never spoken about it? The manuscripts that reference this journey were dismissed or hidden. But why? Get ready, because the details of this theory could turn everything you know about Christianity upside down. The Gospels give us a detailed view of Jesus' early life, his birth in Bethlehem, his escape to Egypt, and a brief episode at 12 years old where he amazed the temple elders with his wisdom. But after that, total silence. There's no record of what happened to Jesus until he reappears at 30, ready to begin his mission as a preacher and healer. This 18-year gap is one of the greatest mysteries in Christian history. Where was he? What was he doing? Many scholars argue that Jesus stayed in Nazareth, living a simple life as a carpenter. But this explanation doesn't satisfy everyone. How could a young man from a rural village acquire not only theological wisdom, but also a profound spiritual understanding that transcended cultures and traditions? Where did the radical ideas that challenged both Jewish law and the Roman Empire come from? This is where the most controversial theories emerge. Some believe that Jesus traveled far and wide, seeking knowledge in unknown lands. And it's at this point that the first rumors of a connection with the East begin to surface. Ancient manuscripts and fragmented accounts suggest that Jesus not only left his homeland, but crossed deserts, sailed dangerous routes, and reached India in search of spiritual enlightenment. But why don't the Gospels mention these years? Were they simply omitted, or was this silence intentional? And more importantly, what did Jesus learn during this hidden period that shaped his mission and message? In 1887, a Russian explorer named Nikolai Notovich traveled to the Himalayan region visiting remote monasteries. During his stay at the Hemis Monastery, located in present-day India, Notovich claimed to have found something extraordinary: ancient manuscripts detailing the life of a man named Issa, described as the holy figure who came from the West and lived among Brahmins and Buddhist monks. According to these texts, Issa fled persecution in Judea and journeyed through Egypt, Persia, and eventually northern India. There he studied sacred scriptures, learned about karma, reincarnation, and the philosophy of nonviolence. He is said to have spent years among sages and mystics, absorbing teachings that later resonated in his own message of love and compassion for others. The most intriguing part: the similarities between the stories of Issa and the teachings of Jesus are striking. For instance, the manuscripts describe Issa preaching equality, challenging social castes, and condemning materialism, themes that echo directly in the Gospels. Coincidence? Or was Issa, in fact, Jesus under a different name? However, when Notovich published his findings in the book, The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ, in 1894, he was immediately attacked by critics and religious authorities. Many accused him of fabricating the entire story. Yet, the debate didn't end there. Other travelers, including Swami Abhadananda and Nicholas Roerich, claimed to have seen similar manuscripts during their own journeys to the Himalayas, supporting the possibility that these records truly exist. Moreover, scholars point out that the parallels between Jesus' teachings and Eastern philosophies are hard to ignore. The emphasis on non-violence, universal compassion, and detachment from material wealth is central to both Buddhism and Christianity. Could these ideas have been inspired by experiences Jesus had in the East? But if these manuscripts genuinely prove that Jesus traveled to India, why aren't they widely accepted? Was there a deliberate effort to suppress this information? Or are we dealing with an elaborate hoax? To answer these questions, we need to delve deeper into the impact this theory might have on the very foundation of Christianity. Even without the Issa manuscripts, there's something that raises eyebrows among theologians and historians: the striking similarities between Jesus' teachings and Eastern philosophies. How could a man who lived in Judea, surrounded by Jewish tradition, express ideas so close to those found in Hinduism and Buddhism, religions that flourished thousands of miles away? Let's start with non-violence. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaches to turn the other cheek and love one's enemies, a message of radical pacifism. This same idea is central in Buddhist teachings, where non-violence, or ahimsa, is considered a fundamental virtue. Did these messages arise from a shared divine inspiration or from direct contact with the East? What about the concept of renouncing materialism? Jesus famously stated that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Similarly, Buddhism teaches detachment from material possessions as a path to enlightenment. Even in Hinduism, the idea that life's true purpose lies not in accumulating wealth, but in achieving spiritual unity with the divine, is prevalent. Another intriguing point is the idea of universal compassion. Both Jesus and Buddha taught that true virtue lies in caring for others, including the marginalized and even one's enemies. Love your neighbor as yourself resonates deeply with the Buddhist principle of treating all beings with kindness. And it doesn't stop there. There are even deeper parallels, like miraculous healings and the use of parables to convey spiritual truths. Just as Jesus used simple yet profound stories to teach divine lessons, Buddha also relied on parables to explain complex philosophical concepts. Could Jesus have learned this method during his supposed time in the East? Even Jesus' retreat into the desert to meditate and fast for 40 days before beginning his mission resembles the spiritual practices of Eastern monks and yogis. What was he seeking in that isolation? Could this reflect spiritual training he acquired during his journey to India? But if these similarities truly point to a connection between Jesus and the East, this raises an even deeper question. Is Christianity a bridge between Western and Eastern spirituality? Or is there something the official narrative has never wanted us to uncover? In the next segment, we'll dive into the possible reasons why this story remains buried to this day. As expected, a theory this explosive didn't go unnoticed. From the moment Nikolai Notovich presented the Issa manuscripts, he became the target of fierce criticism from both scholars and religious leaders. But why is the idea of Jesus spending years in the East so threatening? First, there's the argument of historical credibility. Many experts question whether Notovich really found these manuscripts or if it was all fabricated. Why didn't other explorers before him mention these texts? Why aren't there any copies available for academic study? Some have even suggested that Notovich made up the story for fame, as he never provided concrete evidence beyond his personal account. On the other hand, some argue that there's been a deliberate effort to discredit the theory. The Church, having built its theology around specific gospel accounts, would have much to lose if this alternative version gained traction. After all, if Jesus learned his spiritual lessons in India, it calls into question the uniqueness of his message and, by extension, Christianity itself. The controversy doesn't stop with religious institutions. Many academics dismiss the theory, arguing that it's based on speculation rather than hard evidence. Without archaeological records or verifiable sources, it's difficult for the academic world to take this hypothesis seriously. Yet there are those who claim the similarities between Jesus' teachings and Eastern philosophies are evidence enough to justify further investigation. But perhaps the most fascinating reaction comes from those who believe this theory touches on a hidden nerve in humanity, the desire to connect different spiritual traditions into a single universal truth. If Jesus truly traveled to India, it could prove that all major religions share a common core of wisdom and spirituality. So, are we dealing with an elaborate hoax, a conspiracy to hide the truth, or a lost chapter in Jesus' life that could change everything? Despite the criticisms, the idea of Jesus in India persists, challenging the limits of what we know and forcing us to question what we believe. And in the end, perhaps the real question is, Are we ready to accept a version of Jesus that transcends borders, traditions, and even history itself? If it's true or not that Jesus spent his lost years in India, the theory invites us to reflect on something much greater. The connections between cultures and spiritual traditions often seem divided by insurmountable barriers. The teachings of compassion, humility, and universal love found in Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism remind us that the search for meaning and transcendence is a universal trait of humanity. While we may never have a definitive answer about the Issa manuscripts or Jesus' travels to the East, simply exploring these possibilities forces us to question how complete the official narrative of history really is. And perhaps, most importantly, it challenges us to seek truth beyond what we've been taught. If you were intrigued by these theories and want to dive deeper into other mysteries surrounding the life of Jesus and Christianity, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Let's continue this journey of discovery together. Speaking of mystery, there's a video on the screen right now that I'm sure you'll find really interesting as well. You won't regret watching it. See you there.